Who decided that a pinch of thyme should cost the same as a gallon of milk? Because that's basically what's happening every time you grab a clamshell of fresh herbs off the shelf. You pay $2 or $3, use a third of it, and watch the rest rot. Meanwhile, thyme is a plant that comes back on its own every single year and asks for almost nothing. There are 11 herbs pulling this same trick on your grocery bill, and all 11 grow for pennies in a pot by the window. Here's the full list, cheapest to grow first. Before we start, one thing to keep in mind. Some of these herbs are annuals, which live for one season and then finish, and some are perennials, which quietly come back on their own year after year. Both save you money, they just do it in slightly different ways, and I'll tell you which is which as we go, so you know exactly what you're getting into. None of them need a garden. A sunny windowsill and a few old pots is the whole setup. Let's start with basil, because basil is the one that stings the most. A little plastic box of fresh basil at the store runs you around $3, and it goes slimy in the crisper drawer within 4 days. You know the smell. That sad dark wet smell of basil you paid good money for and never got to use. Now compare that to a packet of basil seeds. A packet holds enough seeds to grow dozens of plants, and it costs about the same as a single clamshell. Basil is an annual, which means it lives one warm season and then it's done, but the store never tells you that part. One healthy basil plant on a sunny sill will outproduce those little boxes all summer long. You just scatter a few seeds in a pot of damp potting mix, keep it in the brightest window you have, and give it water whenever the top of the soil feels dry. Basil loves warmth and light, so the sunnier the sill, the happier the plant. The trick to keeping basil going is to pinch it from the top. Snip the top pair of leaves every week or so, and the plant splits into 2 stems where you cut, then 4, then 8. You end up with a bush instead of a stick. And if you ever see it trying to flower, pinch those buds right off, because once basil flowers it pours its energy into seeds instead of leaves, and the taste turns bitter. Keep it pinched, keep it bushy, and one packet replaces a whole summer of clamshells. Which leads us right into the herb people give up on the fastest. Cilantro. If you've ever bought a bunch of cilantro for a single batch of salsa and thrown the rest away, you already understand the problem. Fresh cilantro is around $2 a bunch, and it wilts almost overnight. Like basil, cilantro is an annual, and it has a habit gardeners call bolting, where it shoots up and goes to seed the moment the weather turns warm. That sounds like bad news, but it's the secret to free cilantro forever. Grow it from a cheap seed packet in a deep pot, because cilantro puts down a long root like a little carrot and hates being crowded. Keep it somewhere cooler if you can, out of blazing afternoon heat, since heat is exactly what triggers the bolting. And instead of fighting that, work with it. Sow a small pinch of seeds every couple of weeks, so as one batch bolts, the next is coming up right behind it, and you never run out. When a plant finally does flower and set seed, let those seeds dry on the stem. Congratulations, you've just grown coriander, the spice and next year's cilantro crop, all from the plant you almost threw out. That's 2 grocery items off your list from one packet. Next up is dill, and dill is a great example of paying store prices for something that practically grows itself. A bunch of fresh dill is around $2, and unless you're pickling, you use a few fronds and the rest turns to yellow mush. Dill is another annual with a deep taproot, so it wants a tall pot, not a shallow one. You sprinkle seeds right where you want the plant to stay, because dill resents being moved once it's settled in. Give it your sunniest window and water when the surface dries out. Harvest by snipping the feathery leaves from the outside of the plant, letting the center keep growing so it never stops producing. And just like cilantro, if you let a dill plant flower and go to seed at the end of the season, it will often drop those seeds and surprise you with free volunteers the following year. One $2 packet can genuinely feed you for seasons. Now we get to a fancy one. Tarragon. This is the herb that makes a simple chicken taste like it came from a restaurant, and the store charges accordingly. When you can even find it fresh, tarragon is one of the pricier herbs on the shelf, easily $3 to $4 for a tiny amount. Here's the honest quirk about the good kind, French tarragon. It doesn't grow from seed at all. So you buy one small starter plant, and that single plant is your whole investment. The good news is French tarragon is a perennial, so that one plant comes back year after year in its pot with almost no fuss. Grow it in a container with excellent drainage, because it hates sitting in soggy soil, and give it a bright spot. Harvest by snipping sprigs from the top through the growing season, which keeps it bushy and encourages fresh leaves. In colder regions, it dies back in winter and returns in spring like clockwork. One plant bought once, replacing a lifetime of those tiny expensive bundles. If you're keeping a running total in your head, notice how little any of this actually costs. You'd think the store would mention any of this. They never do. And we're not even halfway through the list yet. Number 6 is chives, and chives might be the single easiest win on this entire list. A little package of fresh chives at the store is around $2, and half of it always goes limp before you finish it. But chives are a hardy perennial, one of the toughest herbs you can grow, and they come back every single spring on their own. You can start them from a cheap seed packet, or grab one small pot and split it into several clumps, turning one plant into 3 or 4 for free. They grow in a neat little grassy tuft that's perfectly happy on a windowsill. The harvest method could not be simpler. You grab a handful and snip it off with scissors about an inch above the soil, like giving it a haircut, and it just grows right back for the next round. Do that all season long. When the plant sends up its round purple flowers, those are edible too, so nothing goes to waste. A $2 packet of chives is honestly a lifetime supply. Number 7 is flatleaf parsley, the workhorse herb that ends up on top of half the dinners you cook. Fresh parsley is around $2 a bunch, and it's another one that browns in the fridge before you've used a quarter of it. Parsley is technically a biennial, which just means it naturally lives 2 years, growing leaves the first year and going to seed the second. As a kitchen herb, most gardeners simply grow it fresh from seed each season and enjoy the leaves the whole time. It's easy and cheap from a seed packet, though the seeds are slow to wake up, so be patient for a couple of weeks before you see sprouts. Give it a decent-sized pot and steady moisture, since parsley likes to stay a little damp. The golden rule for harvesting is to always cut from the outside. Snip the older outer stems down at the base and leave the young growth in the center alone, because that's the engine that keeps making new leaves. Do that and one plant keeps you in parsley for months. Number 8 is oregano, and now we're back into perennial territory, which means we're back to plants that pay you every year forever. A tiny jar of the dried stuff is a few dollars, and fresh oregano at the store is another $2 clamshell you'll mostly waste. But oregano is a tough Mediterranean perennial that comes back season after season and honestly prefers to be a little neglected. Grow it in a pot with good drainage in your brightest window, and go easy on the water, because oregano makes its strongest flavor when it isn't pampered. Too much kindness waters the taste right out of it. To harvest, snip a stem right above a set of leaves, and the plant branches out into 2 new stems from that exact spot, growing bushier every time you cut. A single plant will hand you fresh oregano for years, and drying the extra is as easy as hanging a few stems upside down in the kitchen for a week. Number 9 brings us to thyme, the little plant from our opening. Thyme is that herb you buy for one recipe, use 3 sprigs, and abandon. A fresh clamshell is around $2 to $3. But thyme is a hardy perennial that returns every single year, and it's one of the most forgiving plants you can own. It grows into a low-spreading little mound that's perfectly happy in a small pot on a sunny sill, and it wants even less water than most herbs, so it's ideal for people who forget. Harvesting is just snipping off whatever sprigs you need with scissors, which naturally keeps the plant tidy and encourages fresh growth. Because it's a woody little perennial, you can trim it lightly in spring to keep it from getting straggly. That's the whole job. Buy or grow one thyme plant, and you may never buy another sprig of thyme again as long as you have a windowsill. That's a good spot to pause for one honest note. None of this requires a yard, a greenhouse, or a green thumb. If you've got a windowsill and a couple of old pots, you have everything you need, and everything I'm describing here works in exactly that setup. Alright, back to the list. Number 10 is mint, and mint comes with one famous warning that works in your favor. Fresh mint is around $2 a bunch, and it's a perennial that grows so aggressively it will take over any garden bed you let it near. That's why the smart move is to keep mint in its own pot all by itself, where it can't invade anything. Give it a container, a brightish window, and regular water, because mint likes to stay a bit moist, unlike the Mediterranean herbs that prefer to dry out. It'll come back every year and spread to fill whatever pot you give it. Harvest by pinching or snipping stems from the top, which keeps it bushy and stops it from getting leggy and thin. The more you cut mint, the more it grows, which is a lovely problem to have when the alternative is buying it $2 at a time for tea and drinks all year. One little pot on the sill can keep a whole household in mint. And that brings us to number 11, rosemary, the crown jewel of the Pay-Once and Forget It Club. Fresh rosemary at the store is another $2 to $3 for a few woody sprigs. But rosemary is a perennial that can grow into a small evergreen shrub and live for many years, which makes buying it in tiny plastic packages feel almost silly once you see one growing. Start with a small plant if you can, since rosemary is slow and stubborn from seed, and put it in a pot with excellent drainage in your sunniest, brightest spot, because rosemary loves light and hates wet feet. Water it only when the soil has dried out, and lean toward too little rather than too much. Overwatering kills more rosemary plants than anything else, so when in doubt, wait a day and let it dry. To harvest, just snip whatever sprigs you need from the tips, which keeps it shapely and full. In warm climates it lives outdoors year-round, and in cold ones it's happy to overwinter as a potted plant on a bright sill. One rosemary plant, sitting in one pot, replacing every $3 package you were ever going to buy. So there's the whole list. Basil, cilantro, dill, tarragon, chives, flatleaf parsley, oregano, thyme, mint, sage, and rosemary. 11 herbs, and every one of them costs you $2 or $3 a handful at the store while wilting in your fridge, when the same herb grows for pennies in a pot by your window. Now I owe you sage because sage rounds out that list, and it's one of the best of the bunch. Sage is a hardy perennial with soft, silvery leaves that comes back every single year and grows into a handsome little shrub. Fresh sage is another couple of dollars for a small package you'll barely dent before it wilts. Grow it in a well-drained pot in a bright window, water it sparingly like the other Mediterranean herbs, and harvest by picking leaves or snipping short stems as you need them. It gets woody with age, so a light trim in spring keeps it producing tender new leaves instead of tough old stalks. A little sage goes a long way in the kitchen, so even a single small plant covers all the roast dinners and stuffing you could want. Like rosemary and thyme, it's a plant you buy once and harvest from for years, which makes those little store packages look like a strange thing to keep paying for. Here's the simplest way to think about all of it. The herbs that live one season, your basil, cilantro, dill, and parsley, you grow cheaply from a seed packet each year, and one packet holds dozens of plants. The herbs that come back on their own, your rosemary, thyme, sage, mint, oregano, chives, and that one tarragon plant you buy or start once and harvest from for years. Either way, the math lands in the same place. A few dollars of seeds and a windowsill erase the herb aisle from your grocery run, week after week after week. If this made you look at your kitchen windowsill a little differently, you'll feel right at home here. Because saving real money on the everyday stuff is the whole point of this channel. Give one of these a try. Start with chives or thyme if you want the easiest possible win, and enjoy watching your grocery bill get a little bit smaller every single week.